America's most distant possession is under threat. North Korea's state media warns that its army is planning potential attacks on Guam.
As an American citizen, I want a president that says that if any nation such as North Korea attacks Guam, attacks Honolulu, attacks the West Coast, that they will be met with hell and fury.
You don't go to war with America. We aren't just a superpower, Sean. We are a hyperpower.
What the Trump administration is now facing is the direct result of the policies of appeasement to North Korean dictators.
Unlike his predecessor, when President Donald Trump draws a red line, he's not going to erase it, move away from it, or back down from it.
Let's allow the Korean Peninsula to be reunited, and let's work together to make sure that that happens. This isn't just a Korea issue. This is a worldwide proliferation issue.
President Trump hitting back after the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that the president has excessive expectations about passing bills in Congress.
Senator, if you can't get it done, get out of the way. Retire. Leave Washington. Go play golf. Go fishing.
The troubling thing about it is that I think that it suggests that Republicans in Congress still haven't learned the lesson of Trump's election. The reason that he beat the most entrenched Democratic machine, he intended to keep the promises that he was making on the campaign trail. I will say this, just an observation about country music, which is my new passion. Which you know, Steve, when we first started, I was saying to myself, I don't even like country. I know these guys are famous, but I don't know them.
Sure.
Now I can't get enough of it. If I ever don't want a beer, all I have to do is put it on the radio for 7 minutes.
And then you want one.
A beer or a whiskey.
Or a dog or a Bible.
Yeah. If I lost my dog, if I broke up with somebody, or I would ask somebody out and they said no, there's always a beer or whiskey to turn to.
See, this is why everyone loves living in the country. There's lots of whiskey, lots of dogs, Bible, and relationships.
Absolutely. I've never heard it put quite like that.
Have you been out on the streets of New York City?
Yeah.
They like it here, too. Any of the Irish pubs around
that
here.
happened to one person just last night.
Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. We have a Fox News alert at 7:03 here in New York City, and North Korea says this morning that after President Trump made it clear that if they don't dismantle what essentially they're doing over there, they will face the fire and fury of the United States. North Korea said sound dialogue is not possible with President Trump, and so they are suggesting that perhaps as early as next week they will, quote, surround Guam with enveloping fire and will launch 4 intermediate missiles in their direction. They are erratic, as we know the North Korean missiles are, but they suggest they will stop 15, 20 miles away from Guam.
They got to go to their nuclear. They got to go to their nuclear expert, and he's going to get a referral on when he's going to shoot that off. But he's shooting for mid-August. But I think there's one thing a little bit different here. Now there's pressure on him to shoot a rocket near Guam. He actually called himself out.
Well, guess what? The United States is defending itself. Secretary Jim Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, you remember he was called, he released this statement. The United States and our allies have the demonstrated capabilities and unquestionable commitment to defend ourselves from an attack, while our State Department is making every effort to resolve this global threat through diplomatic means. It must be noted that the combined allied military has now possessed the most precise, rehearsed, and robust defensive and offensive capabilities on Earth. The DPRK regime's actions will continue to be grossly overmatched by ours and would lose any arms race or conflict it initiates.
Right, exactly. So there you've got the Secretary of Defense. He's keeping the pressure on him. At the same time, you've got the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who had kind of a more calm message, and he said the reason the president was using language like this was because Kim doesn't speak in diplomatic terms, and Mr. Tillerson said Americans should sleep well at night. So you got these two different voices coming out of the same administration. Our friend Heather Nauert, who is the spokesperson for the Secretary of State, said yesterday, when asked, are these administration officials reading off of different scripts, and she said no, the U.S. is talking in one voice. And it started with the president when he essentially ad-libbed fire and fury. Apparently he had spoken to his advisors on a conference call before they got started. They had the general idea of what he was going to say, but, you know, he doesn't like to take a script per se from the aides, and he didn't. He ad-libbed it.
You might ask why Guam. First of all, it's closer to them, so their chance of hitting is a lot better than it would be if they fired it into the lower 47. Also, there's a U.S. Navy installation there, submarine squadron, Coast Guard group, and an air base. But good news is we have 6 ballistic missile defense ships. They're in that region. They're capable of hitting any of these North Korean missiles, and Guam has that THAAD anti-missile system as well.
So the governor of Guam last night was on Fox News Channel and said, listen, it was 8 in the morning there, said, I'm not worried. I just talked to the Secretary of Defense. I feel we have a robust defense, and I'm not going to let these guys intimidate me. In fact, he actually said at the end of the interview, vacation in Guam. It's beautiful. Here's Eddie Baza.
As far as I'm concerned, as an American citizen, I want a president that says that if any nation such as North Korea attacks Guam, attacks Honolulu, attacks the West Coast, that they will be met with hell and fury. What I'm concerned about is if a U.S. senator says initiate an attack and causing a war, and remembering that they're in the Mariana Islands, this is American sovereign soil. This is 600-mile archipelago of islands similar to Hawaii, where there are over 200,000 American citizens.
Right.
So it's important that as we make decisions, that those folks that are in a position of leadership, that they understand, too, that war is the last option, because not only will tens of thousands American military forces and dependents be affected by a regional war,
right,
but because the Western Pacific has American soil in it, then a couple of 100,000 Americans could get caught in the crosshairs.
A little upset that Senator Lindsey Graham said it's about time we handle this threat right away, and while it's over there, he said, well, I'm over there and it's a U.S. territory, so that's what he's a little upset about, but he thoroughly backs the president in its rhetoric. But he basically is in the minority. Republicans, for the most part, back the president's rhetoric, who evidently told his chief of staff, Secretary Chief of Staff Kelly, I'm going to go do this, but he didn't say specifically what he was going to say, followed by the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. But I do think that afterwards, I was shocked at the anger and the consternation poured at the president for his remarks.
And by the way, I said lower 47. I was
48.
corrected. 48. I forgot your state, Kansas.
Well, you know, we know what you were thinking. We had 57 states. That's what you were thinking of. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Anyway, here's the montage Brian was talking about.
President Trump sounds more like a North Korean leader, unfortunately, than an American leader.
It used to be that we looked at the North Koreans and said, you know, those are the nuts with nukes. But now it looks a little bit like we have our own nut with nukes.
This is the first time that the dangerous apocalyptic statements of the North Korean regime have been met by dangerous apocalyptic statements by the President of the United States.
We have never heard this kind of bluster from an American president to another world leader.
Right.
Oh, really?
Never, ever. Well, it's never happened before.
Keep in mind, the president's point was North Korea's threats are intolerable. Also, at the same time, while he was talking about fire and fury, he did not set any red lines. Was he hyperbolic? Sure. But we know that this president has been hyperbolic in the past. But at the same time, the Wall Street Journal writes it is less damaging to U.S. credibility than Barack Obama's failure to enforce his red line in Syria when the use of chemical weapons. And then, Brian, going back to your point, what's interesting is the Wall Street Journal talks about how Lindsey Graham was on a television show over the weekend and said that he had talked to President Trump, who said that he would go ahead and there would be war with North Korea if they continued to develop the long-term missiles. So the main audience for what Mr. Trump said, the people of China, obviously they can put the screws to Kim, and also the people of North Korea, because if they hear that the President of the United States isn't messing around, they're thinking regime change and reunification, which would be the ultimate end game.
My humble opinion is they see the Democrats ridiculing the president and they think the president shouldn't be taken seriously, which is dangerous for these lawmakers here not to understand this isn't domestic politics. But meanwhile, do we have any proof that any president that's ever worked in the White House has ever said anything like that? Does anyone know anything where we can get those videotapes?
No, according to other anchors, it's never been said before.
Okay, or we might have this.
It's pointless for them to try to develop nuclear weapons, because if they ever use them, it would be the end of their country.
Once again, North Korea has defied the will of the international community and the international community will respond. And together we will ensure that North Korea understands the consequences if it continues down its current path.
We will not hesitate to use our military might to defend our allies and our way of life.
We could obviously destroy North Korea with our arsenals.
And of course, it was during Bill Clinton's administration that then former President Jimmy Carter talked the administration into a program where the inspections of North Korea simply did not work.
Right. And also, when we tried to pull our, Jimmy Carter said, I have an idea, let's pull our troops out of South Korea. You know who protested? China. Sure. Because they were concerned that Russia was going to take control of the peninsula, take control of the north.
All right, let us know what you think about this whole situation. What do you think about the president's response to this and his tough rhetoric? All right, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some headlines for us. Good morning, Jillian.
Good morning to you guys, to you at home as well. Let's begin with dramatic new video this morning of a Navy pilot rescued at sea after crashing his fighter jet off the coast of Key West. The Coast Guard lifting the pilot into a helicopter, the pilot setting off a smoke signal for help moments after ejecting from his jet during a training exercise. It's unclear what led to the crash. The pilot is okay. Coming up in our next hour, Fox News correspondent and former Navy fighter pilot Leah Gabriel joins us to discuss the recent uptick in military crashes. 2 Cuban officials are kicked out of the U.S. after a string of bizarre incidents, leaving American diplomats with severe hearing loss. The symptoms now linked to a covert sonic device placed inside or near the Americans' residences in Cuba. It's unclear if it was a deliberate attack. The State Department, FBI, and Cuban officials are investigating. A rally cat is born. The game between the Cardinals and Royals interrupted when a cat takes to the field.
That's a cat. Squirrel. That's a cat. Somewhere Tony La Russa is nodding in approval. There it is.
Ow! Ow! Ooh, the cat biting and scratching the grounds crew as they ran it off the field. Then this happened on the very next play.
Yadier Molina. Molina! Deep left!
Grand slam, game-winning grand slam, I believe 5th of his career. Get this, though, after the game, guys, the Cardinals having so much fun on social media, tweeting, quote, we are feline, pretty good, get it? Remember the last time we had a rally animal? You remember that, Brian?
No, I don't.
2011 NLDS. Cardinals, Phillies. Cardinals go on to win the World Series. I'm not bitter at all.
Well, Cardinals and Phillies are both animals.
Hey,
think about it.
It's true.
Cataclysmic. All right,
okay,
thank you, Jillian.
Meanwhile, thanks, Jillian. 13 minutes after the hour, she wanted to be president, and she failed. So as Hillary Clinton finally found her calling, the pulpit?
Oh, God. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blaming President Trump's excessive expectations. But is it time for the GOP to take a page out of the Democrats' book to get something done? David Webb's going to sound off on that. Come on up, David.
Morning, David. This, can you believe that Mitch McConnell, who has screamed repeal and replace for 7 years, couldn't get it done? Must repeal and replace Obamacare. That after the Senate Majority Leader said this earlier this week.
The new president had, of course, not been in this line of work before, and I think had excessive expectations about how quickly things happen in the democratic process.
Well, Democrats got things done back in 2008, so is it time to take a page out of their playbook? Here to weigh in is Fox News contributor and radio host David Webb. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
So when President Trump just tweeted out, must repeal and replace Obamacare, is he really saying it's time to repeal and replace Mitch McConnell?
Yes. And it has been for a long time. Look, there was an unsuccessful run to unseat him by Matt Bevin, and we saw how that played out in Kentucky. The people of Kentucky, the people of America, have been ill-served by a weak leader for many years. Mitch McConnell's very statement about excessive expectations. You know, you haven't been here long enough, President Trump. You don't know how we do things. The problem is they don't recognize in the leadership in the Republican Party, especially McConnell, that the president won because the people have excessive expectations. We actually expect things to get done, and this president has gotten a lot done in his first 100 and 200 days, but he hasn't done it with the help of the Senate in this case.
But you have heard, David, over the last couple of months where people have said, well, you know, if anybody can get it done, it's Mitch McConnell. He's a brilliant tactician when it comes to the way the Senate works. Doesn't the Senate work differently than pretty much anything else on the planet?
It has the most arcane and sometimes backwards rules. And when you look at the Senate, you know, this club of 100, as I like to call them, have been the president's body for decades, whatever president it is, because they made deals. They can't even make a deal here on behalf of the American people. The problem is Republicans, for different reasons, on opposite ends of the spectrum ideologically within the party, will go against Obamacare. So when you have 52 people who can't make up their minds, they can't move the ball forward, they were the very Reagan principle of, look, let's get 70% now and go back for the other 30.
Ed Rollins, who was a campaign manager for Ronald Reagan, he came out a couple of days ago and said, look, this is not a good place. Time to ditch Mitch.
It is time for Mitch McConnell's leadership to leave the Senate. Problem in the Senate is they keep making deals, and now they're not even doing that. Why? There has to be a reason. It's blocking President Trump. Why haven't they gone to recess? Because under Article 2, the president can call them back into session. They're doing everything with these pro forma sessions to stop his recess appointments.
Let me ask you a real quick question. So Mitch McConnell could be watching right now. He's getting the message from the President of the United States regarding repeal and replace or doing something about Obamacare. Does he get something done before the end of the year with Obamacare, quickly?
Look, it's doubtful at this point with Mitch McConnell. That's the only way to say it. But the message is from the American people. We have excessive expectations. Get things done.
All right. David Webb, thank you very much for joining us live today. All right. Meanwhile, speaking of Congress not getting